Abbotsford players that are up with the NHL team right now because of the injuries that the Canucks are facing. Right now, it's the perfect timing, and he's going to fit in seamlessly on the ice, off the ice, as a leader. Good signing for Abbotsford.
All right. Also want to mention this. David Pagnotta reporting today. I think multiple people might have reported this, but I saw it on the fourth period. All right. Alex Wennberg. The Canucks have called the Sharks about Alex Wennberg, the center who makes $5 million annually. He is in the final year of his deal. Harm, give me your thoughts on Wennberg, and then I really want to just give a huge shout out to Thomas Drance and what he used Wennberg as an example. I heard it on Halford Bruff this morning, and that he also wrote about it at The Athletic. So I want to dive into Tom's idea as a standalone. But first of all, Alex Wennberg, the player, not the acquisition cost. We'll talk about that in a sec. Alex Wennberg, the player, would he help the Canucks? I mean, obviously he would help them right now, but how much would he help them?
Of course. He's, I would say, a third line caliber center who can play up the lineup in a pinch. Very defensively reliable. He's 6'2". You're looking for him to kind of fit the Pia Suter role, right? Where he's not going to be the sexiest player. He's not going to be necessarily that dynamic. And in fact, Wennberg, like Suter was a consistent 15 plus goal scorer. Wennberg's not in that range. He's very much a pass first guy. But the point being, this is a player that you're expecting to produce in the 30, 35 point range. But can capably take on tough defensive matchups, help you on the PK, and for reference, he's in my mind a significant upgrade on Teddy Bluger. Like I think there's a pretty sizable gap where I look at Bluger as he's a fourth line center, and I think Wennberg is a credible 3C.
Now I want to get to Drance's idea because I love this. All right, this is what Drance was proposing: was you quote unquote overpay for Alex Wennberg because you desperately need a center. You get it, and if it helps you make the playoffs, then great. You've made the playoffs, and you don't love what you had to pay for it, but you're making the playoffs in a pretty pivotal year for obvious reasons. The Quinn Hughes element and all that sort of stuff. The Canucks want to compete this year. They made that clear. If it doesn't work out, like if you are sitting there saying Wennberg's not going to be enough to help this team, then and I should have mentioned with Drance's idea, you get San Jose to retain 50% on Wennberg's contract. So you pay the premium assets to get them to do that. And then if it doesn't work out, by the time the deadline rolls around, that new rule of you need 75 days to pass between times of retention on contracts, the Canucks could float a $1.25 million cap hit on Alex Wennberg as a rental at the deadline that you could recoup at least some of the assets that you paid to get him. That was Drance's thought process. I really like it. I think that's a great idea.
Definitely. And it is interesting because you get into the conversation of, all right, how much should you be willing to give up? And especially for a team like San Jose to sell on a quality veteran like Wennberg this early in the season. It's like San Jose knows it has the leverage. And what's interesting to point out for the Sharks are they're actually off to a pretty awful start. Like the vibes last year were Chicago's miserable and San Jose is having a fun time. They've flipped this year. Is San Jose still winless?
Yes, they still are winless.
So at a time where they're drowning, and Wennberg is one of the few veterans they have that can steady the ship, what does it say to that group to sell him now when they could potentially really need that support? Because look at San Jose's lineup right now. Their top six is all young guys except for, and really their whole forward group. The only veterans you really have are Toffoli, Wennberg, Skinner, and Ryan Reeves and Barclay Goodrow. But Goodrow and Reeves hardly count because they shouldn't be on NHL fourth lines. Like they're that bad. Wennberg's one of your only options in your top nine. Because otherwise, just look at all the young players they have. They have Celebrini, Smith, Eklund, Misa, Colin Graff, Gaudette is, I guess, a veteran, but I don't know if he really counts. The point being, for the vibes, they could really use Wennberg. That's where it sort of becomes tricky is just how much are you going to overpay? Because I think when we look at this overall discussion of how desperate and how urgent should the Canucks be to try and add a center, I think with the context of how important this year is for keeping Quinn Hughes, like you have to be, I think, willing to throw some assets in and quote unquote overpay on paper, just because the opportunity cost of not doing so and missing the playoffs, having a bad year is like a catastrophic downside scenario. But I think you have to be somewhat responsible if and when you do push your chips in as well. Where, for example, I really don't want to see them move this year's first round pick unless you're confident that it's for an actual needle moving player, because you have to protect the nightmare worst case downside risk of, even if you protect this year's first round pick, right? You trade it for some kind of center. If you miss the playoffs and you get to next offseason and Quinn says, I'm not confident in winning here, I'm not going to resign. Well, the Canucks might get to keep their draft pick this year because of the conditions on it. But then you're looking at a scenario where with 1 year left, you're probably going to have to look at moving Quinn Hughes. And then that means you owe a future unprotected first round pick at a time when you're trying to build back up as quickly as possible. That's a potential nightmare. So yes, the Canucks should be willing to peddle other, draft picks. They should be willing to, especially a guy like a Victor Mancini.
I was just going to say, Victor Mancini would be like the third best defenseman on the Sharks blue line right now.
Yeah, so it's like, and this is the point Jant's kind of made too. Second round picks, Victor Mancini, like those are the kinds of assets that you're, I think, comfortable moving and where the risk to reward makes sense. But if we get into the territory of you have to give up a first round pick when you don't know how the team's future looks like, not only this season, but beyond that, that's where it becomes a dicier proposition in my mind.
Wennberg, the player, though, like, what do you like about him? I noticed the low face-off percentage. I don't love that.
Ideal.
Not ideal, because this is kind of I don't want to call it a dilemma, but yeah, let's call it a dilemma. This is the dilemma the Canucks face, is when they're looking for a center, like they're going to have to go get someone. They can't keep rolling out the center that they have right now. Like Max Hass is playing on the second line. Dude wasn't on the roster to start the season. And I know there's some hyperbole in that, but they need a better option at center. And I'm not saying better than Max Hassan. I'm just saying they need to have more options. They need to upgrade. And whether that's an upgrade on Aatu Ratu or Teddy Blueger or Max Hassan, or if it's like a significant upgrade on those guys, what I'm trying to say is, like, could you go find a like third or fourth line guy who's really good at faceoffs and that be a solid upgrade for this team? Yeah, you could. It wouldn't cost as much, but is that moving the needle enough where you're like, okay, we don't need to go out and do more? And I think that's where the Canucks kind of are stuck right now is, yeah, okay, if we go trade for this guy, it might help us win more draws. It might help us a little bit, but it's not going to move the needle enough. Like, we need someone like Wennberg who's going to help us in a bigger way.
Yeah, and even Wennberg, I do like him, and he would be a legit upgrade, but he's not a guy that's going to drive a lot of offense, for example. He's more offensively limited than Pius Suter, and this is where I don't want to keep reiterating it, but the mess that the Canucks are in right now, management has to take some responsibility for it. They've backed themselves into this corner. They had so much time to try and prioritize re-signing Pius Suter. They decided, you know what, we're going to allocate that cap space towards Evander Kane instead. And they knew, like, everybody and their dog knew that Filipino has had an extensive history of concussions. And here's the tricky part. Here's the other part too. It's not as if, oh, this happened in New York and we acquired Hedel and he's been healthy ever since. They knew this past offseason that, well, he had another one down the stretch. And despite that, to still roll in, and again, I could excuse them not being able to land a true top six guy, like a Marco Rossi, for example, because those types of players didn't move. But why not a Suter? Or even I was banging the drum for a Trevor Zegras, especially considering the acquisition cost before Zegras is dealt. And now you look at Zegras and he's up to 5 points in 6 games. How much more comfortable would you feel? And we know that Zegras isn't a perfect player by any means. He sucks at the faceoff dot. But how much better would you feel about Trevor Zegras in the 2C spot right now as opposed to Max Sasson? So the point being, even if you didn't land your dream target, there were other ways. Like they needed some kind of contingency plan. And now they're backed into a tough corner where even this Wennberg idea, I think it makes sense, but Canucks fans probably still aren't going to like what it would take to get him. And even if you do get Wennberg, he's a good player, but he's not going to transform this team's forward group.